The sky above Earth was no longer blue. It had not been blue for 3 months now. Ever since the galactic coalition ships appeared, massive, dark, and silent, hanging in the atmosphere like storm clouds that never moved, the sky had turned a strange shade of gray and green, like a bruise that would not heal. People had stopped going outside. Cities that were once loud and full of life had become quiet. Streets that were once full of cars and people and noise were now empty. Shop windows were dark. Parks were abandoned. Even the birds had stopped singing, as if they too understood that something was deeply wrong with the world. Everyone on Earth was waiting for the end. 3 months ago, the first message had come from the sky. It was not a greeting, it was not an introduction, it was simply an ultimatum, delivered in every human language at the same time, broadcast across every screen, every radio, every device on the planet simultaneously. The message was short. It said, "You have 90 days. Submit your planet to the Galactic Coalition. Hand over your resources, your lands, and your people as a servant class, or your world will be erased. There will be no second message. There will be no negotiation. This is your only warning." And then, silence. No alien ships landed. No alien soldiers appeared. The ships simply stayed in the sky, watching, waiting, like hunters who were completely sure their prey had nowhere to run. At first, humans did what humans always do. They panicked. Then they argued. Then they tried to fight back. 17 different nations launched missiles at the ships within the first week. Every single missile stopped in midair, frozen by some invisible force, and then dissolved into nothing, like snow falling into warm water. The ships did not even move. They did not fire back. They simply let humanity's weapons disappear as if they were nothing more than small, harmless insects trying to bother something enormous. That was when the real fear began, because it was not the attack that broke humanity's spirit. It was the complete and total indifference. The aliens were not angry. They were not threatened. They were not even paying attention. To them, humanity's greatest weapons were nothing more than a minor inconvenience, something to be brushed away without a second thought. After that, the governments of the world came together. Every leader, every president, every prime minister, every king and queen, all gathered in emergency meetings. They argued for weeks. Some said surrender was the only option. Others said humanity must fight to the last breath. Some proposed sending scientists to try and communicate. Others proposed trying to secretly build a weapon powerful enough to damage the ships. None of it worked. None of it led anywhere. The days kept passing, and the sky kept watching. By the time the 90th day was 3 weeks away, the world had changed completely. Hospitals were overwhelmed, not from any disease or attack, but from fear. People were having panic attacks, breakdowns, complete mental collapses. Food supplies were running low because farmers had stopped farming. Factories had shut down. Schools were closed. The entire system that kept human civilization running had slowly, quietly begun to fall apart, not because the aliens had destroyed anything, but because hope had run out. It was in this broken, exhausted world that a small group of Earth's last decision-makers gathered in an underground bunker beneath what used to be Geneva, Switzerland. The room was cold and gray. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. A long metal table sat in the center, surrounded by tired, hollow-eyed men and women who looked like they had not slept in weeks, because they hadn't. Maps covered the walls. Screens showed real-time footage of the alien ships above every major city. Coffee cups sat empty and forgotten. 12 people sat around that table. Between them, they represented the last organized leadership of planet Earth. There was a general with medals on his chest and defeat in his eyes. There was a scientist who spent her whole career studying space and now wished she had not.
There was a former president who kept his hands folded on the table as if praying, though he had stopped believing anything would help weeks ago. They had been meeting every day for months, and every day the conclusion was the same. They had nothing. No weapon, no plan, no solution. The general spoke first, as he always did. "We have 19 days left. I need something, anything, that gives us a real option, because right now we have nothing." Silence. The scientist rubbed her eyes. "We have tried everything within our technological capability. Their systems are beyond anything we can match. We cannot fight them. We cannot communicate with them on our terms. Every transmission we have sent has been ignored." More silence. Then, from the far end of the table, a quiet voice spoke. It belonged to a woman named Ilara Voss. She was not a general, not a president. She was a researcher, someone who studied alien cultures and languages. She had been mostly quiet in these meetings, listening, observing. But tonight she placed a thin file folder on the table and slid it toward the center. "There is one thing we have not tried," she said. Everyone looked at her. "We have tried weapons, we have tried technology, we have tried political communication through standard channels. We have never tried sending someone who actually understands how these species think." She paused. "I want to talk about Cain." The name landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Some people frowned. A few exchanged confused glances. The general's eyes narrowed. "Cain," he repeated slowly. "James Cain, the linguist?" "Yes," Dr. Voss said simply. The general leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath that was almost a laugh, almost not quite. "He studies languages. He's not a soldier. He's not a diplomat. He's not even a public figure. He's a language professor. You want to send a language professor to negotiate with beings who have ignored every world leader, every military, and every scientist we have thrown at them?" "I want to send the one person on this planet," Dr. Voss said, her voice steady and calm, "who spent his entire life learning not just how alien species speak, but how they think, how they feel, what they value, what they fear, what they lost." She opened the folder. Inside were pages of notes, research papers, translated texts, years of work. "Cain has spent 23 years studying the languages and emotional psychology of 17 different alien species that have made contact with Earth. He doesn't just translate words, he understands meaning, context, pain." She looked around the table. "Every species in that galactic coalition has a history, has losses, has things they carry with them that they never speak about. Cain knows those things, and he knows how to reach them." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then the former president, the one who had been sitting with his hands folded, looked up for the first time in what felt like hours. His voice was rough and tired. "Where is he now?" Cain was at home when they came for him. He was sitting at his small kitchen table in his small house in a small town outside of Edinburgh, Scotland. A lamp burned low beside him. His daughter, 8 years old, with her mother's eyes, was asleep upstairs. His wife sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold. They were not talking. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said. They were simply sitting together, because being together was the only thing that still felt real. When the knock came at the door, Cain already knew. He had been expecting it. He looked at his wife. She looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but her face was still, strong, the way she always was when things were hardest. Cain stood up slowly, walked to the door, and opened it. 3 officials stood in the cold night air, their breath visible in the dark. "Mr. Cain," the lead official said quietly, "Earth needs you." Cain stood in the doorway for a moment, a quiet, ordinary man in a worn sweater with ink-stained fingers and tired eyes. He did not say yes right away. He turned and looked back at his wife one more time. She nodded, just once, and that was enough. Kane turned back to the officials. "Give me 5 minutes to say goodbye to my daughter." The government vehicle moved through the empty streets like a ghost. No sirens, no lights, no escort, just a plain black car moving quietly through the dark roads of Edinburgh, carrying one man and 3 officials who barely spoke a word the entire journey. Kane sat in the back seat, a small bag on his lap. Inside the bag was a change of clothes, a few energy bars, and his notebook, old, worn, its cover soft from years of handling, its pages filled with thousands of words in dozens of alien languages, written in his careful, small handwriting. He held the bag on his lap with both hands and watched the empty streets pass out.
The laughter went on for a long time. It rolled through the council chamber in waves, rising and falling, echoing off the high curved walls, bouncing between thousands of alien bodies packed into the tiered seats that rose in every direction like a coliseum built for gods. Different species laughed in different ways. Some made high clicking sounds. Some produced deep rumbling vibrations that Kane could feel in his chest. Some simply opened their mouths wide and let out sounds that had no human equivalent. Strange, musical, horrible sounds that meant the same thing in every language across the universe. You are nothing. You do not belong here. You are small, and we are not. Kane stood at the podium and let them laugh. He did not grip the podium tightly. He did not look down at his feet. He did not scan the room nervously or shift his weight from one foot to the other. He simply stood, both hands resting flat and relaxed on the podium's surface, and waited with the particular stillness of a man who has already made peace with every possible outcome. This stillness, this quiet, unshakable human stillness, was the first thing that began to change the room. It started at the edges. A few aliens in the outer seats stopped laughing first. Not because anything had happened, simply because something about Kane's complete lack of reaction made them uncertain. They had expected fear. They had expected desperation. They had expected the performance of a small creature trying to appear larger than it was. They had not expected this. One by one, like candles being blown out across a large dark room, the laughter began to quiet. Not all at once, but in patches, spreading slowly inward from the edges toward the center. Lord Vraxis noticed. His smile did not disappear, but it changed slightly, tightened at the corners in a way that, if you knew how to read a Vraxian face, indicated the very earliest stage of something that was not quite curiosity, but was close to it. He raised one long, pale hand. The remaining laughter stopped immediately. Complete silence. Vraxis leaned forward on his floating throne and looked down at Kane with half-lidded eyes. "You have 5 minutes, little human," he said. His voice was deep and smooth, and carried the particular tone of someone doing a very small favor they did not need to do. "Speak. Entertain us, and then we will finish what we came here to do." A timer appeared on the enormous display screen behind the throne, glowing red numbers. 5 minutes, counting down. Kane looked at the timer. Then he looked back at Vraxis. Then he did something that made the entire room shift uncomfortably in their seats. He smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a desperate smile, a small, calm, almost private smile, the smile of someone who knows something important that nobody else in the room knows yet. Then he opened his mouth and began to speak.
He did not begin in the universal trade language that all coalition species used for official communication. He did not begin in English. He did not begin with an introduction or a greeting or an appeal for mercy. He began in Old Vraxian, not modern Vraxian, the clean, formal version used in official coalition records. Old Vraxian, the ancient dialect, the language of Vraxis's home world, a language that was so old that most linguistic databases did not even carry it, a language that had not been spoken aloud by a living being in over 400 years, because the world that had spoken it no longer existed. The first word left Cain's mouth, and Lord Vraxis went completely still. Not the controlled, deliberate stillness of a powerful being choosing to be patient, the involuntary, total stillness of someone who has been struck by something they did not see coming. His hands, those long, pale fingers resting on the throne, curled slowly inward, just slightly, almost imperceptibly. But Cain noticed. Cain had been trained to notice exactly that. He continued speaking. His pronunciation was not perfect. He knew that, and he did not pretend otherwise. But it was close enough that every syllable landed with weight and meaning, because the meaning was not just in the words themselves, but in the fact that this human had learned them at all, had cared enough to learn them, had understood that they mattered. The murmuring in the council chamber began almost immediately, thousands of alien voices whispering to each other in confusion and surprise. Who was this human? What language was he speaking? Why was Lord Vraxis not moving? Cain spoke for 40 seconds in Old Vraxian. Then he shifted, smoothly, without pause, into the native tongue of the Kalari delegation, seated in the third tier to his left. The Kalari were an ancient amphibious species, their home world a water planet that had been strip-mined to a dead rock by a resource war 3 centuries ago. Cain spoke to them in their own language, not the trade version, but the old coastal dialect, the one their grandparents had spoken on the shores of seas that no longer existed. The 3 Kalari delegates straightened in their seats simultaneously. One of them placed a hand over the center of their chest, a Kalari gesture so culturally specific and so deeply personal that it was only used in moments of profound emotional recognition. Cain did not stop. He shifted again, this time to the guttural clicking language of the Thorn, who occupied the upper eastern seats, then to the wind-breath dialect of the Sivari, then to the deep harmonic tones of the ancient Maquin tongue. Each time he shifted languages, he was not simply translating the same message. He was saying something different to each species, something specific, something that reached into their particular history, their particular loss, their particular wound, and acknowledged it, directly, without performance, without political calculation. He was simply saying, "I know what happened to you. I know what you lost, and I am not going to pretend otherwise." The council chamber, which had been so loud with laughter just minutes ago, was now so quiet that Cain could hear the soft hum of the holographic displays around the walls. With 2 minutes remaining on the timer, Cain paused. He reached into his bag and took out his notebook. He did not open it. He simply held it in both hands for a moment, this worn, ordinary object, completely out of place in this vast and alien room. Then he set it gently on the podium in front of him. Then he looked up, not at Vraxis, not at any specific delegation. He looked at the room as a whole, all of them, every species, every face, and he spoke in the universal trade language so that every being present could understand every word. I am not here to beg. I am not here to negotiate terms or offer resources or make political arrangements. I am not here because my people believe they can match your power. We know we cannot. We have known that from the beginning." He paused. "I am here because I have spent my entire life studying the people in this room. Not your weapons, not your technology, not your military formations or your political structures." Another pause. "Your stories, your histories, the things that happened to your worlds before you became what you are today." Something moved through the chamber, not a sound exactly, but a change in the quality of the silence, a deepening. Every species represented in this room has survived something, has lost something, has carried something for a very long time, something heavy, something painful, something that does not have a name in any language I have ever studied, because some things are too large for language. He looked down at his notebook for just a moment. Humans know this feeling too. We have been surviving things that should have destroyed us for as long as we have existed. Floods, ice ages, wars that leveled entire civilizations, diseases that took half our population at a time. We have lost so much, so many times, that loss is almost built into us now, the way rings are built into the trunk of a tree, each one a record of a hard year survived. He looked up again. "I am not asking you to spare us because we are innocent. I am not asking you to spare us because we are powerful."
The senior council official's name was Drath. He had served the Galactic Coalition for 312 years. He had attended more formal sessions than he could count. He had processed the absorption of 67 civilizations. He had recorded the destruction of 19 worlds. He had sat at his curved desk in this very chamber through wars, through treaties, through the rise and fall of species that had once thought themselves untouchable. In 312 years, Drath had seen everything, or so he had believed. Lord Vraxis's words hung in the air above the chamber like something physical, like a weight suspended from nothing, defying every law that should have governed it. The words were simple, they were quiet, they were spoken in the formal coalition dialect with the same measured tone that Vraxis used for every official declaration. But their meaning was something that Drath's 312 years had never once prepared him to record. The destruction order for the human world is suspended. Not canceled, not reversed, suspended. A legal distinction that kept every door open, that gave the coalition a way to interpret this moment as a pause rather than a surrender. Drath understood immediately why Vraxis had chosen that specific word. He had not lived 500 years without understanding exactly how to give an extraordinary thing an ordinary shape. But suspended or canceled, the effect on the chamber was the same. For approximately 4 seconds, nothing happened at all. Then everything happened at once. The explosion of sound was enormous. It came from every direction simultaneously, from the upper tiers where the smaller coalition species sat in their hundreds, from the formal delegation sections where the major overlords had their designated positions, from the official areas along the walls where the administrators and record keepers had been sitting in their careful professional stillness. Every voice in the chamber was suddenly speaking at the same time, and none of them were saying the same thing. The Thorn delegation, 6 massive armored beings who had not moved once during Kane's entire speech, were on their feet immediately, their deep clicking language accelerating into a rapid percussive storm of sound that Kane recognized as extreme agitation. The Thorn had been among the most aggressive voices for Earth's immediate destruction in the weeks leading up to this session. Whatever Lord Vraxis had just decided, they were not accepting it quietly.
3 rows below them, the Sivari delegates were doing the opposite. They had pulled inward, their translucent bodies flickering with the bioluminescent pulses that Kane knew indicated rapid emotional processing. The Sivari had lost their own home system 2 centuries ago in a coalition resource conflict. Kane had spoken to them directly during his speech, had named specific losses, specific places, in their own ancient wind-breath dialect. Whatever they were feeling right now, it was not simple. Along the western wall, 2 coalition officials had already left their seats and were moving quickly toward a private communication terminal. Kane did not need to guess what they were doing. There were forces outside this chamber, aboard the waiting warships, who had been expecting a very different outcome today. Someone needed to make sure those forces received the correct orders before anyone acted on the orders they had been anticipating. Drath was already moving too, stylus in hand, recording everything with the practiced speed of someone who understood that the official record of this moment was going to matter enormously in the days and weeks ahead. Every word, every reaction, every second. Kane stood at the podium and watched all of it. He did not move, he did not speak, he did not allow himself to feel anything yet, because he had learned long ago that the most dangerous moment in any negotiation was not before the decision, but immediately after it, when everything was still fragile and nothing was yet real. He kept his face calm, his hands flat on the podium, his breathing slow and even. In, out. In, out. The chaos lasted for approximately 6 minutes before Lord Vraxis raised his hand. The silence that followed was different from the silence before, rougher at the edges, less complete, filled with the residue of 100 unfinished arguments that had been cut off mid-breath. But it was silence, and in the coalition, when Vraxis called for silence, silence came. He did not look at the delegations, he did not address the room. He looked at Kane. "You will remain in the chamber," he said. His voice had returned to its usual controlled depth, smooth, measured, giving nothing away. "You do not celebrate," Vraxis observed. It was not quite a question. "Not yet," Kane said. Something moved across Vraxis's face, so brief and so subtle that Kane almost missed it. Almost. It might have been in a being who had not spent 500 years removing such things from his expression, something close to respect. "Wise," Vraxis said quietly. Then he turned back to his counsel, and the arguments began again, structured now, formal, channeled through the coalition's official procedures like a river that has been redirected into a controlled channel. Still powerful, still dangerous, but contained. Kane stepped back from the podium and stood quietly to the side. A young coalition aide, a small gray-skinned being with enormous dark eyes who could not have been more than adolescent by their species standards, appeared beside him and offered him water in a sealed container. Kane took it, nodded his thanks, and held it without drinking. He was watching the room, still working, still reading every face, every gesture, every shift in body language, because the decision had been made, but the decision was not yet safe, and there was a difference between those two things that mattered enormously. The conditions took 4 hours to negotiate. Kane was not the primary voice in those 4 hours. Coalition diplomats and the human representatives who had been waiting in a secondary chamber were brought in to handle the formal procedural details. Kane sat at a side table, available for consultation, occasionally asked to clarify a point of cultural translation, or to explain the reasoning behind a human position. He answered every question precisely and briefly, and without embellishment. He drank the water eventually. He ate nothing. He did not check the time. What emerged after 4 hours was not a peace treaty, not yet. It was what the coalition formally called a provisional observation status, a temporary arrangement in which Earth would be classified as a protected observation world, neither a coalition member nor a target for absorption, for a period of 50 standard galactic years. During that time, formal diplomatic processes would begin. Humanity would have time to develop, to establish proper representation, to grow into something the galaxy could engage with on more equal terms. 50 years was nothing by galactic standards. By human standards, it was 2 full generations. It was enough. When the last formal document was processed and recorded, and the session was officially closed, the chamber began to empty slowly, delegations filing out through their designated exits, officials gathering their materials, aides moving quickly on whatever urgent business the last 4 hours had created for them. Kane remained at the side table until the room was nearly empty. Then he stood, picked up his bag, put his notebook inside it, and walked slowly toward the main exit. His legs were tired in a way that had nothing to do with walking. His eyes felt dry and heavy. His hands, now that there was nothing left to hold or to do, had developed a faint tremor that he had been carefully preventing anyone from seeing for the last several hours. He was almost at the door when a voice stopped him. "Human." Kane turned. Lord Vraxis had descended from his throne. He was standing on the chamber floor, actually standing, not floating, not elevated, for the first time in the session. At his full height he was extraordinary, nearly 4 meters tall, ancient and enormous, filling the empty chamber with a presence that the floating throne had somehow diminished rather than enhanced. He crossed the chamber floor toward Kane with slow, deliberate steps. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the emptied room. He stopped a few meters away, close enough for a private conversation, far enough that it was not intimate, just 2 beings speaking honestly in a room that was no longer performing for anyone. He looked at Kane for a long moment, his ancient eyes unreadable again. The brief window that had opened during the session had closed, but it had closed differently than before. Not locked shut, just closed, the way a door is closed when someone is inside rather than when the room is empty. "How did you know?" Kane asked. His voice was very quiet. "About my world, about what I—" He stopped, did not finish the sentence. "I read everything I could find, in your own language, the old texts, the ones from before the wars, the ones your people wrote when they still had something to write about." Vraxis said nothing. "There was a poet from your home world," Kane continued,